Hey guys, my name is Andrew and I have over 10 years of photography experience. Today we're going to be talking about a question I get all the time: how to pick the right camera. If you're someone who is just getting into photography, if you're switching over from your iPhone, there are hundreds of different types of cameras and models you can choose from. So how do you pick the right one? What factors are important and how do you approach this without getting overwhelmed? If that sounds like you, then stick around and we're going to talk about one simple thing that you can do today to figure out which camera is the right fit for you. Here's the truth. The best camera isn't the most expensive one. It's the one that fits your needs. Today, I'm going to walk you through how to figure out what camera fits your needs best based on your specific use case. At the end of the day, a camera is a tool to get a specific job done. If you need to hammer a nail, you're probably not going to be picking up a spoon. It's not going to get you very far. It's the same with cameras. You need to find the one that's going to help you get the job done you need to do. Now, this is where you need to sit down, look at yourself in the mirror and say, what am I actually going to use this piece of equipment for? Am I buying this just because it looks cool, or am I going to actually be excited to take this and put it in my bag every day, take it out of my bag and take a shot with it? The first camera I bought was super expensive. It broke the bank. Did not have a lot of money at the time, and I was like in debt purchasing a camera. It was great. I took it on a trip. I got some amazing pictures, but at the end of the day, I realized I could do the same thing with a much cheaper model. So I went back to the camera store after the trip, returned the camera, and downgraded to one that was about half as expensive. And that camera is one I still use today. So let's get into the questions I ask myself before I buy a camera, and I wish I had asked myself before I invested in the first camera I bought. There are 5 technical specs that are all gonna be super important when picking a camera, and we're gonna be able to suss out the answer to the question for each of these specs after and as we go defining our use cases. So those specs are the cost of the camera, the size of the camera, the type of lens it accommodates, the type of sensor of the camera, and finally, the ergonomics of the camera. The first thing we're gonna talk about is the size of the camera. Now, this is one of the most important things to think about because you wanna find a camera that's gonna fit into your existing travel lifestyle. If you're someone who's just getting into photography and not used to taking a second bag just dedicated to your camera and all your gear, you're probably not gonna wanna start doing that from day one. I recommend looking back at your last 3 trips, figuring out how many bags did you take? Did you just take a carry-on? Did you take multiple bags? Did you check a bag? And assessing how much extra space you had. If you're like me, you're just gonna take a carry-on, you're gonna squeeze everything you can, cramming it into one bag, and you're probably gonna, in that case, want a camera that's gonna be a little bit smaller and maybe is gonna fit into that suitcase if possible. If you're someone who's already been a photographer for a couple years and you're used to having a dedicated camera bag, well then it's okay to get a little bit bigger of a camera because you have more space to take it with you. The next thing to talk about when it comes to travel photography is whether it's a detachable lens camera or it's a fixed lens camera. Now this goes hand in hand with size. Typically detachable lens cameras are gonna be bigger and take up more space because you're gonna have to think about how to pack the lens as well as the camera, whereas fixed lens cameras tend to be smaller and they're easier to travel with. If you're someone just getting into photography, you don't have a lot of space on your trip, and maybe you're going backpacking, well, I'd recommend looking into some fixed lens cameras. I know it sounds cool to have a camera that you can take the lens off whenever you want and change it out, which it is, but at the same time, if you're just getting into it, it's gonna be less expensive, and the sizes of the camera and the size of the lens are really gonna fit this lifestyle that you live. Although, if you're someone who has a little extra space when they travel, maybe you're someone who is interested in the physics of lenses and how light works, or you just think lenses are cool, well then looking into a detachable lens camera is going to be a really good idea because then it'll give you the options as you go to check out different lenses and to experiment with how do I use this lens for, really close-up photography, or maybe you're going on safaris and you want to figure out how to shoot an animal that's hundreds of yards away. Think about the size of the lens and the type of traveler that you are, and whether you can accommodate something that has an interchangeable lens, or if something like a point and shoot with a fixed lens is gonna be a little bit better of an option for you. And there's a lot of great point and shoots out there. I hear a lot of flack on them, but at the end of the day, there's some amazing cameras. Look at Fujifilm, they have amazing point and shoots that have amazing specs on the rest of the camera. Don't judge a camera by the type of lens before you've looked at the rest of the specs. The next thing to think about, and this one gets a little bit more technical, but I'm gonna spare you the technical details today, is the sensor. The one thing that you really want to think about when it comes to the sensor is, am I going to be taking my travel pictures and blowing them up really big because I'm putting them on a wall, or am I just posting them on Instagram? Well, the size of the sensor is primarily going to dictate the resolution of the image. There are a couple other technical things to think about when it comes to sensor. Again, I'm going to save that for a different video. But generally speaking, if you have a bigger sensor, you can blow that picture up bigger. And if you have a smaller sensor, it's going to be limited more so on the size of the image at the end of the day. There's 2 primary types of sensors for our use cases to talk about today. There are full frame sensors and there are crop sensors. If you guessed correctly, then full frame sensors are the ones that will let you blow up an image bigger, whereas a crop sensor is going to be a little bit more limited because it's about half the size or some sort of ratio in size to the full frame sensor, potentially 2/3 crop. There's a couple common ratios out there that you'll hear depending on the brand of the camera. The primary thing that I recommend understanding is what are you gonna do with the picture at the end of the day that you've already taken? Is it gonna be blown up, or is it gonna be something that's gonna stay at thumbnail size on your Instagram grid? Then you're not really gonna have to worry about full frame sensors, and you're gonna be able to spend less money on the camera at the end of the day. The next thing we're gonna wanna think about is the ergonomics. Now, ergonomics to me means where form meets function. It's gonna be sort of the feel of all of these technical specs, like the size, the lenses, and then how you actually use those and how it feels at the end of the day. For example, in travel photography, if you're someone that is a hiker, you're going to glaciers, and you have to carry a camera with you, and maybe you're wearing gloves, so your hands are very slippery, well, you probably don't want an all slick metal point and shoot camera that's just gonna slip right out of your hand. Maybe look for something with a grip, or that you can attach a grip onto that can give you a better feel for the camera. The other thing to think about, I like to compare to the number of cup holders in a car, because it doesn't really matter, but it can slightly adjust how you interact with the piece of equipment. And it is how many exterior dials and buttons does that camera have versus how many things you have to do by going through a touchscreen. The reason this is important is because if you're someone who has to make a lot of changes to the settings on your camera quickly, like maybe you're on a safari and a panther ran by, you're gonna wanna be able to tweak a bunch of settings very quickly. Now, if you have to go through a all digital menu to change all those settings, that's not gonna be a very quick ergonomic feel to the camera. Rather, you're gonna wanna look for something that has exterior dials that'll allow you to change those settings without having to toggle through a menu that's on some sort of touchscreen. The final thing we have to talk about that's gonna help you make the right decision based on the use case that you have is gonna be the price of the camera. Now, this is probably the most obvious thing when it comes to picking out a camera, but it's something that I like to come to more at the end of my decision-making process. Of course, you do wanna use it at the beginning to sort of narrow down the field of what options are available, but after that, you wanna go through these other specs first and figure out, does this piece of equipment meet my actual needs and meet my use case? And then once you find the final couple options that meet your use cases, then pull price into the equation and figure out which camera you're most comfortable spending money on. So once you've figured out your use case and how it influences all of these specifications, then you have a great Goldilocks selection of cameras that you get to pick from, and then, really take some creativity with it. Maybe you found two cameras that meet all of your specs and one looks a little bit cooler than the other one, well, go with that camera. It's your camera at the end of the day. You wanna have it for as many years as you possibly can. And if a cool camera makes you wanna keep that camera longer and it does everything you need it to, why not? In summary, the most important thing to figuring out your camera is gonna be the use case at the end of the day. There's tons of use cases out there for cameras, but if you can figure out what you wanna use your camera for and go through this checklist of 5 items as you're looking through the options that are out there, then you're gonna be able to find a really great selection no matter what it is that you wanna do. Hopefully this has been helpful for you guys today. If so, drop a note in the comments or add a note on what you think about when you pick your camera to help other folks out. Upvote the ones that help you out. And if you need any tips on anything else photography-wise, drop a note in the comments and I'll add that to my list of videos to make following this. Thanks guys, and I'll see you next time.